The sound of the gavel slamming echoed to the cavernous federal courtroom. But for Rachel Monroe, the loudest sound was the pounding of her own heart. "Order in the court," the bailiff announced. But Judge Harold Bennett was already leaning forward, his glasses perched on the end of his nose, staring down at the defense table, and specifically at Rachel. "Ms. Monroe," the judge said, his voice grave. "Approach the bench." The entire room shifted. The rustle of expensive suits, the scratching of pens from the press gallery, everything stopped. Rachel stood up from her seat at the very end of the defense table, the intern seat, the seat farthest from the action, as she walked past the lead counsel, Jonathan Pierce. He didn't look at her. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, his face pale. Just an hour ago, this man had been the king of Chicago's legal scene. Now, he looked like a man who had just watched his career set on fire. And he had. He just didn't know it was Rachel who lit the match. If you've ever been told you're too young, too inexperienced, or too small to matter, keep watching. Because this is a story of how a silent intern became the loudest voice in the room. To understand the silence that fell over that courtroom, you have to go back to 3 weeks prior. Sterling Pierce was the kind of law firm that smelled like old money and fresh anxiety. Marble floors, 20-foot ceilings, and a view of Lake Michigan that reminded everyone who worked there exactly how small they were. Rachel Monroe was in her final year of law school. She wasn't there because her father played golf with a senator. She was there because she worked 2 jobs to pay her rent and had a terrifying ability to spot patterns in chaos. Her assignment was a simple document review, the grunt work. Boxes upon boxes of financial records for the firm's biggest client, Vertex Systems, who was being sued for corporate fraud by a rival tech giant. The plaintiff claimed Vertex had stolen proprietary code. Jonathan Pierce, the lead partner, had dubbed the case the slam dunk. He stood in the conference room, his voice booming. "They have no paper trail," Jonathan declared, pouring himself a scotch at 10 o'clock a.m. "Evelyn Cross is good, but she's chasing ghosts. We win by denying everything. We stonewall." He looked around the table at the associates. "I don't want to hear about technicalities. I want to win." Rachel sat in the corner, a stack of documents in her lap. She raised a hand. Jonathan sighed, annoyed by the interruption. "Yes? The intern?" "Sir," Rachel said, her voice steady. "I was reviewing the bank logs from the acquisition in 2019. There's a discrepancy. A wire transfer of $4 million that was listed as a consulting fee. But it traces back to a shell company owned by the plaintiff. It looks like they paid someone inside their own company to frame Vertex." The room went silent. For a second, then Jonathan laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a sound of arrogance dismissing reality. "Consulting fees?" Jonathan mocked. "You think I haven't looked at the books? You think a first-year intern is going to find a smoking gun that a partner with 20 years of experience missed?" He leaned in. "Ms. Monroe, stick to photocopying. Leave the legal strategy to the adults." The associate snickered. Rachel lowered her hand. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the familiar sting of being the smallest person in the room. But she didn't argue. She just nodded. "Of course, Mr. Pierce." But she didn't put the documents back in the box. She put them in her bag. "Before we see how this ends, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever known you were right, but everyone around you is too loud to listen? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever had to watch someone make a mistake you could have prevented." 2 days before the trial, the atmosphere in the office was toxic. Jonathan's stonewall strategy was cracking. Evelyn Cross, the opposing counsel, had surprised them. She had found a witness, a former Vertex employee, willing to testify that the stolen code existed. Jonathan was pacing the conference room. "She's bluffing," he shouted. "The witness is compromised. We attack his credibility. We destroy him on the stand." Rachel was in the room, taking minutes. She watched the strategy form. It was suicide if they attacked the witness. They opened the door for Evelyn to introduce the financial records to prove motive. The only way to win was to prove the financial records were fake, which Rachel knew they weren't. The fraud was on the plaintiff's side. She had to speak up. She walked up to Jonathan during a break. He was on his phone, barking orders. "Mr. Pierce," she said. He covered the phone mic. What? I'm busy. The witness, she whispered. If you cross-examine him on credibility, Evelyn will introduce the transaction logs under Rule 404B. Shell bury us, but I have the proof the shell company records. If we file them as a defensive exhibit now, we control the narrative. Jonathan looked at her like she was a bug on his windshield. Are you still talking about the consulting fees? He sneered. I told you, I don't have time for your fantasies. Go get me a coffee. Black, 2 sugars. He turned back to his call. Yeah, sorry. Some kid intern thinks she's Matlock. Anyway, we go for the throat tomorrow. Rachel stood there for a long moment. She had done the math. She had triple-checked the sources. She had verified the offshore account numbers. She held the truth in her hands, and it was being treated like trash. She walked out of the office. She didn't get the coffee. The trial began. The courtroom was packed. It was the kind of high-stakes drama that made careers. Jonathan looked impeccable. He commanded the room. But Rachel sat at the far end of the table, watching Evelyn cross. Evelyn was different. She didn't shout. She moved like a scalpel. She called her witness, the former employee. He lied. He said he saw Vertex executives steal the code. Jonathan stood up to cross-examine. He was aggressive, loud, belittling. You were fired for embezzlement, weren't you? Jonathan shouted. Sustained. The judge barked. Counselor relevance? Jonathan pressed on, trying to destroy the man. But as he did, Evelyn stood up slowly. Your Honor, she said smoothly, if the defense is attacking the witness credibility regarding financial matters, I have a series of exhibits here, bank records that clarify exactly who was paying whom. Rachel froze. She looked at Jonathan. He hadn't expected this. Objection, Jonathan said, but his voice wavered. Overruled, Judge Bennett said. Let's see the records. Evelyn handed the files to clerk. It was a setup. She was introducing the very evidence that would frame Vertex evidence that Rachel had tried to warn Jonathan about. But because Jonathan hadn't filed Rachel's counter-evidence, these records looked damning. The judge looked at the papers. Mr. Pierce, these records suggest a payout from your client to this witness. It's fabricated. Jonathan stammered. Rachel watched the jury. They were turning. The confidence was draining from the defense table. It was the next morning. The tension was thick enough to chew. They were in a sidebar conference with the judge. Jonathan was sweating. The judge was demanding an explanation for bank records Evelyn had introduced. Your Honor, Jonathan said, we need time to audit these files. They are incomplete. Rachel couldn't take it anymore. She had the real files, the complete files. She stood up from the table and walked toward the sidebar, holding the red folder. Mr. Pierce, she whispered, loud enough for the judge to hear. Jonathan spun around. The entire courtroom was watching. Sit down, Jonathan hissed. But I have the answer, she said, holding up the folder. The proof that is a shell company. It's right here. Jonathan's face turned red. He was panicked, cornered, and his ego was on the line. He didn't want to be saved by an intern. He wanted to save himself. He stepped away from the bench and ripped the folder from her hand. He didn't open it. He simply dropped it into the trash next to the counsel table. We do not need distractions, Jonathan announced to the room. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I apologize for the intern. She is clearly out of her depth. She has no legal standing to speak. He looked back at Rachel. His eyes were cold. Leave the courtroom. He ordered, go back to the office. Pack your things. You're done here. The judge watched the interaction. He said nothing. It wasn't his place to manage the firm staff. Rachel stood there, humiliated. Every eye in the room was on her, the jury, the press, Evelyn Cross. She felt the tears prick her eyes, but she swallowed them. Hard. She looked at the trash can. Her evidence was in the garbage. Did you hear me? Jonathan said, his voice dripping with venom. You're fired. Get out. Rachel nodded slowly. She straightened her blazer. She didn't look at Jonathan. She looked at Daniel Reed, the junior associate sitting next to Jonathan. Daniel had been kind to her. He had given her tips on citation formats. He looked terrified right now. Rachel walked out of the courtroom. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. But Rachel Monroe wasn't finished. She sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway. The sounds of the trial were muffled behind the thick oak doors. She felt small. She felt stupid. But then she remembered something her grandmother used to say: the truth doesn't need a title. It just needs a voice. She pulled out her phone. She didn't call a friend. She didn't cry. She opened the secure cloud drive where she had backed up every single document the night before, just in case. She saw an email notification. It was from the court clerk of public update on the case docket. Exhibit 12 admitted into evidence by plaintiff counsel. Evelyn Cross was winning. Jonathan was drowning. Rachel stood up. She looked at the courtroom doors. She couldn't go back in. Jonathan would have her removed by security. But there was another way. She walked to the public filing window at the clerk's office down the hall. "I need to file an amicus brief," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. The clerk looked bored. "You're a party to the case?" "No," Rachel said. A concerned citizen. But I have exculpatory evidence that the court must see under Rule 605. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Sweetheart, you can't just file random papers in a federal trial." "I know the rules," Rachel said, her voice hardening. "This is judicial notice evidence. It's public record financial data that corrects a false statement made on the record. You have to accept it." She slid the stack of papers under the glass. It wasn't a brief. It was a printout of the offshore account links, the audit trails, the proof that the victim company had staged the fraud. The clerk sighed, stamped the papers, and slid them into the incoming evidence tray. Rachel walked away. She had done what she could. She went home. Back inside the courtroom, Jonathan was in freefall. The judge was reading the plaintiff's exhibits. "Mr. Pierce," Judge Bennett said, "these records are damning. Unless you have a rebuttal, I'm inclined to issue a summary judgment for plaintiff." Jonathan was pale. "Your Honor, we need a recess." Suddenly, a side door opened. The bailiff walked up to the judge's bench and handed him a file. "New submission from the clerk." "Your Honor," the bailiff whispered. Jonathan looked confused. "What is that?" "I didn't file anything." The judge opened the file. He adjusted his glasses. The room was dead silent. Judge Bennett read for a long time. He looked up, his eyes wide. He looked at Evelyn Cross. "Counselor, are you aware of the account numbers listed on page 4 of the submission?" Evelyn stood up, confused. She walked to the bench to look. Her face dropped. This wasn't in the discovery," she stammered. "It's a matter of public record in the Cayman Islands." The judge said, his voice icy. "It appears the witness who just testified and the plaintiff's company share a hidden funding source. This indicates a massive conspiracy to defraud the defendant." The judge turned his gaze to Jonathan. "Mr. Pierce, did your team submit this?" Jonathan had no idea what was happening. He looked at the file. He saw the charts, the timelines, the numbers, and then he saw the name at the bottom of the cover letter, Rachel Monroe. His face went white. "No, Your Honor," Jonathan whispered. I didn't." "Well, someone did," the judge said, "and it has just changed the entire trajectory of this case." The verdict came down an hour later. Not guilty. Case dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff was referred for a criminal investigation. It was a total victory, a legendary win. The client, the CEO of Vertex, shook Jonathan's hand in the hallway. "Unbelievable work, Jonathan," the CEO said. "I don't know how you pulled that out of the fire, that last piece of evidence." "Brilliant." Jonathan forced a smile. His stomach was churning. "Where is she?" Jonathan asked suddenly. "Who?" Daniel Reed asked. "The intern. Rachel." In the chaos of the victory celebration, Rachel was gone. The next morning, Rachel walked into the Sterling Pierce office. She wasn't wearing her intern badge. She was carrying a small box to collect her things. She walked into the main lobby, and there he was, Jonathan Pierce. He walked up to her, that trademark smile plastered on his face, the same smile he used with clients. "Rachel," he said, extending a hand, "I heard about the filing. Quick thinking. I'm glad you took the initiative. It shows." "Grit." Rachel looked at his hand. She didn't take it. "You fired me," she said quietly. "You threw my work in the trash. You humiliated me in front of the judge." Jonathan laughed awkwardly. That was That was just courtroom theatrics. High-pressure environment. You understand. Look, I spoke to partners. We're willing to offer you a junior associate position. Full tuition reimbursement. The whole package. You're a star. Rachel looked around the lobby. She saw the other associates watching. She looked back at Jonathan. I don't want a job because I bailed you out, she said. I want a job because I'm good. You are good, Jonathan insisted. You're one of us. No, Rachel said. I'm not. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a letter. She handed it to him. What is this? My resignation, she said. Evelyn Cross offered me a position on her team. She was impressed by the filing. She values the truth. Something this firm seems to have forgotten. Jonathan froze. You're going to the opposition? I'm going where I'm listened to. Rachel corrected. She turned to leave. Rachel, wait. Jonathan called out. You can't just walk away. I made a mistake. I see that now. Rachel stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. Mr. Pierce, she said, the law is about details. It's about listening to the quiet voice in the corner. You stopped listening a long time ago. Maybe that's why you almost lost. She walked out the glass doors. The sunlight hit her face. She didn't look back. Jonathan Pierce stood in the lobby, holding her resignation letter. The silence was deafening. The other associates looked at him, and for the first time, they didn't see a king. They saw a man who had been saved by the person he hated most. Rachel Monroe didn't need Jonathan's validation. She had something far more powerful. She had the evidence, and she had her dignity. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one who says the least until they speak. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. It helps this channel reach more people who love stories about justice, revenge, and the truth winning out. What would you have done if you were Rachel? Would you have saved the boss who fired you or let him crash? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to watch another story about an underestimated genius taking down a corrupt system, click this video right here. You won't believe the twist at the end. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.